All right, so today we're going to do our sculpting of our stone bricks. And I already did this one wrong, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete it. I did it wrong because this is supposed to be a tile, and I'll show you how to fix that problem. So we'll delete this just like that. I know, don't delete it. And then actually, I don't even want this one anyway, so because really these are all supposed to be the same size, so we'll deal with that in a second. I'm just going to hide this one to make sure I'm not nuts. Okay, but the thing I want to talk about is we aren't going to do these today. We aren't going to do any of the upper ones, the stuff that have the textures on it, or any of the curved surfaces. That's for another day. So what I'll do is I'll just hide everything and then just look at this one. So these are all just bricks, right? They're just single bricks. They're all broken out as we've done. And this one I don't think I've organized yet, so really we want this one to be moved up to the top, just for your own sanity. If you can keep these organized, because you're ending up using a ton of files. So we'll just move this to 3. So if I go up, there we go, down, down, down. This one should be on the bottom. So it should be this one and then this one. So I put that in the right order. And then if I go down to the next one, this one I put in the right order. Okay, so what we're going to do is just talk about making these stylized. And how's the best way to do that? Well, there's some orb brushes and other things that we can do to make them better, but let's talk about what stylized is first. So stylized are games like Diablo or WoW. Blizzard is the king of this stylized look. They actually kind of came up with it. And I think the one thing you should understand is stylized looks originally were made to obviously to look cool, but also because of the limitations we have with the engine. If you look at WoW, WoW is the way it looks is because we had very little time, power in the internet and the computers and stuff, so we had to have something that worked on everybody's computer as best we could at all times. That said, things like Darksiders and stuff are the other examples that have gone on with it too. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use some of the tools that somebody who worked on it did, and the way we're looking at it is we're looking for this kind of style, right? This guy's named Michael Vicente. He has a brush set called Orb Brush. We'll get to that in a few minutes and how to put them in. But really, what we're looking at here is this idea, if I can remember how to do stuff in this program, this is pure ref, that is basically stylized means big information or telling the story information, meaning that these cuts and stuff, I'm not even sure if I like this because there's a lot of tiny detail in here, but this tiny detail is very sparse. It's not like they put the grain of the brick. Here's another one that has a lot more little detail than you probably want, but it is still stylized because it's still not giving us grain and porous value. Here's something else. Again, all these little things you can do to make yourself stylized. One of the things I want to point out is this highlight around the edge of all the hard surface cuts. That is something we'll do in Substance Painter, but if we look at the original, where these came from, this is Michael Vicente's style. He worked for Blizzard, he worked for Darksiders or Vigil, and stuff like that too. But, you know, again, we have that highlight. We'll talk about how to get that. That's just the shader or a texture, the way we're going to hack it in there. But see, these simple forms that you can see over and over again, but still tell the tale. This is a very simplified version of this, and some of these are stylized. Birds don't have eyebrows that are in their skulls, but that's fine. Again, the highlights and stuff like that, and here he's just broken this off, and this stuff comes naturally from the shader, so don't worry about getting those highlights, because that's not any more than a harder edge being used in the mapping setup. So, and again, simple, broken up, really flat planar areas for stone. Really, it's just a flat plane of the brick, and then the border is kind of cut away in a lot of cases. This has a little bit more work on it, but it's because he's trying to show the striations on side of this crystal, so it feels more like a crystal. And here's a stone bridge, and look, these are very simple. We're going to do a little bit more like these on our walls just to get some examples of how to get to it. But again, one crack, one shelf off. This wood is simple wood, repeating textures, really fat grain, and then, you know, a couple of carved in areas, probably the same tools, and he's done some other things to make it interesting. But the idea behind stylized is that it's simplified forms, and it's a little bit more artistic, so it's another reason I have you do it, because there's ways to make realistic stuff less, let me pull this and put this to the side here, easier in some ways. In some ways, because beginning students, when they have the option to do more realistic stuff, they just kind of throw stuff on it and it gets messy and dirty. You really want to keep yourself organized and go from there. And organized chaos is the best way to think of it. So anyway, we'll start with this one. I'm not going to use any brushes that are bought or paid for in this lecture, but I'm also not going to use the orb brushes, the ones that Michael Vicente made, until a little bit later. So I just want you to understand that you can use the tools you have here. Michael Vicente's brushes are just made for this stuff. So they're usable, but I like some of the standard brushes just for what we're doing here. And you want to keep the style consistent as you can, but what we'll do is we'll go solo. And this is the reason that if we keep them in order, we know where we are. All right, so we'll go back up. There we go. And then we need to divide these, right? So we need these to be divided. These are simple ways to divide. So if we go to geometry, we can just turn off the smooth and divide them a few times like this until we get to something we like. If you look at the resolution on here, you can see that. Here's what your real test is. I usually use Dynamesh standard, and that's just the brushes, and then B, D, and then Dynamesh standard in this case is S, which we already have up. I just have a shortcut for it. But if you use Dynamesh standard, let me turn off this, and I can see all the pixels and particles, or not particles, but all the pixels in the geometry that I'm not there yet. Now, the reason I do it this way first is so I can get an idea of how high I need to go. I went to 8, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say smooth now and see if I can get something a little bit smoother. Yeah. So I'm doing this smooth, and then I'm going to go one more, and now I'm up to 393. Let's see what I get for this. It's still pretty pixelated, right? Well, one of the problems is that this object is divided unevenly. If I look at it, it's divided into quads. That means that every polygon has more area for the left to right than it does the up and down. So you're going to get, even with the more amount of polygons, you're going to get all this kind of pixelated stuff. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, first off, I want to undo that. I'm going to just collapse it right now. When you say delete lower, it allows you to go up and down, but for bricks in this, we just want to get going. And the best way to do that, for me, is I delete. And this is my methodology. It's not, you can now see exactly where the polygons are. This is not everybody's way of doing it. It's just the way I've done it, and I like it. So I'm going to then turn on a Dynamesh. Now, the one thing I'm going to point out about Dynamesh is that Dynamesh is scalable, meaning that the size of the object in the scene, or in the ZBrush scene, is controlling how many subdivisions you get. All right, we'll see if this is any better. Okay, so we're just going to use what's called Dynamesh, right? And Dynamesh, like I said, is depending on how big the object is. So the bigger the object is, the less resolution you need to put in here. The smaller the object is, the more. Right now, I kind of think our objects aren't that big because it was brought in as one big object. And we can go over how ZBrush, as far as I understand it, works for size of stuff. But right now, we're just going to deal with what we have. So this is not generally how high I will make this. But I'm going to come in here and go to like 2500 and try and say Dynamesh and see what we get. And it's 6600. So right away, it's double the polys, right? But right away, or tries, it's better. Okay, so if it's at that size at 2200, now make sure if you want to keep the resolution, I mean the object to stay the way it's being calculated, go back before you do it, before you change it. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So we're going to go to, instead of 2500, we'll just try 2000. Click on the number, or you can do the slider, but you can just click on it and type 2000, and then click Dynamesh. And there's a bunch of other options inside of here, I'm not going to get into that. So 422, let's see what we get. See, it's still better. It's still better than what we had before. If I go back out, we're at 393, and we're looking like this. See all the pixelization? And then if we go to, then we go to 2000, and say Dynamesh, and we get a beauty. So, and it's only a couple hundred, or it's only 20K over. Okay, so we're going to stick with that. We're going to say 2000 when we do all these bricks. Okay, so for now, that's fine. And if I was going to do a character or other things, I would definitely not want to be up in the 2000s. I want to be as low as I can, so I'd make the character bigger. ZBrush just has a funny way of doing stuff. So if you find yourself having to add stuff, really what you want to look at is the active points. You want to look for your active points, and that's one of the reasons I divide it before I get there, so I know about where I want to be. That way when I do my Dynamesh, I've got that number set. So if I do this now, and I have this, the brush I'm going to use for every part of this right now is there's going to be two. There's going to be Trim, Dynamic, which is this one, and there's a version of this inside of the ore brushes, but I actually like this one better. And then there is the Smooth brush, and Smooth is just the space bar, and it'll smooth out whatever you do. See how it's smoothing? What we want is not to do that right now. We want to try and do this without smoothing. So we're going to go this, and see how quickly I can get that, and this. And this is the great thing again about Dynamesh, is that now I can reset it, and it'll try and do it. Now the one thing you want to try and do is when you're sculpting across here, try and keep it even or masterful, meaning that you don't want to come back and do this and this and this. You don't want to do strokes. You want to try and keep it really evenly stroked out. So if we go to here and I go to that, that's a really big one, and it's all depending on the size of your brush, how much geometry it's going to do. The way I have it set up. If you have it set up the normal default way, which probably you haven't gone into the brush changing yet and why I do it this way, then it's basically turn this off. No matter what size I make it to screen. Hold on. Oh, it's too big. Backwards. I'll just do it up here. No matter where I am on the screen, it's always going to be the same size relative to that object. I like it the other way. So I can zoom in and zoom out and make the size of the brush bigger compared to the object. So I'm just really going to come in here and do this. I'm just basically dividing all these edges, coming back in, and if I do have to do a couple of strokes, that's semi-fine. Just you don't want to do it all over. You want to try and keep this as even as possible, so you get some kind of really simplified. Again, we're trying to go for simplified. If you want to add some in here, one of the things you might want to do is turn this down. And you can just do a little bit in here, but we'll get to making really cool detail, but all we're looking for is some way to break up this stone. Really, that's a good start. I may do one more here just to divide it again. I don't think I hit this edge here. See, I am repeating my strokes, but I'm doing it over and over again, and then you kind of want to make sure your corners have that signature kind of cut in there, and then I can keep going. And you're just looking for forms and shapes of the brick, and to make it feel like it's stone and stylized version of it. And again, we can come up here, and again, I do the same thing. That's why I warn you, just make sure you're trying to keep it really simple. Otherwise you get caught in the loop. So there, I smoothed it out a little bit. Still not crazy about it, but that's okay. We're just getting in some rough numbers here, rough feels. Okay, so I'm going to use my arrow key down. It goes to the next brick. Now we already know that I can divide this to by 2000, and let's see what happens if I divide it without using the divide up there first. Okay, maybe I did 200. I want 2000. There we go. Alright, so it looks pretty good. So again, the reason I use the divide at first is to get an idea of where I want to be, and then you can just collapse it and keep it that way. But now, if I do this, my brush is too small, so compared to the size of the object, I'm going to pull back out, and I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and I'll do this, and this. We're just trying to get some basic forms in, and since it's only one-sided too, remember, you don't need to make this on the back. We're just doing the front sides of these bricks since we're making a normal, and we're baking textures off of it. So we'll take a look at it this way, and if you want, you can open them all up and look at it. You can, unhide them all by saying this. You can get an idea of what your two bricks look like together, and if you like them. Now, one of the things you'll learn is you can't really carve with ZBrush having a model in front. It doesn't do a great job that way. It's on purpose because then you can also make them transparent, and that will give you the ability to carve a little bit better and see what you're doing. Okay, so there, I'm going to pull this down a little bit and kind of give it a little bit more of that. And then with this, I'll pull out and make them bigger. And I'm going to speed through this, but just take your time and do it right. Really try and get those pockets of sculpted edges, really hard edges in here if you can. If you're going to add stuff like I just did, just make sure it reads that way. And don't worry about making the pock marks or the other stuff. Again, that's going to come with the next brushes. So let's do this edge here. Actually want this edge more gone, and for me I just have to raise the brick out and do it like this. So a lot, like Michael Vicente did not just kick these things out, and that's the amazing thing about it, is I'm sure they just look like pop, he's done. But he spent time, he made brushes, and those brushes are free and popular for everybody. Okay, so we'll just keep going here. And I'll just do another one. And again, now that I know what size I need it to be, I just Dynamesh, do this, 2000, and oops, I did it wrong. First you do this. It's very important you do this first, set it first, and then do this. And now we've got about the 410, 411. And again, it's kind of back over here. It's kind of like this. And we can go back to solo, turn off the ghost, and just come in here and try and think it through. There's also the article that I sent out from level 80 on stylized stuff, and there's a pretty detailed explanation of this artist's opinion and how it works, and I agree with almost all of it, so it's a really good article to look at. I'm going to put that in the homework stuff, or maybe even in the YouTube channel. This one's bigger, so 2,000 may not be enough, so we can either divide it, or we can just say, let's say 2,500 for this one, since it's a box, and we'll see what we get. And I think I did 250 again. 2,500, and then this. It's thinking. Okay. So this one's a little bit bigger, so maybe not 2,500. Let's go to 250. Also, ZBrush freezes a lot when you're doing this stuff because doing calculations. Don't panic. It will freeze sometimes, but don't panic when it does it now. So again, I'm going to come in here and do this, and then I'm going to take this one out and this one. I'm kind of just really simply pulling in some things. And if you spend your time and do it, you're going to get some really cool stuff out of it. And you can go into the back just so it looks different sometimes, but it's not important as the front. You want to transition into the corners a little bit more, and then you want to have a simple divide right there, and I'll go right back over it again. Then I'll cut this off. And there's a few ways to do this. A lot of people like to cut into the geometry to get this to happen. I just like the feeling of sculpting and getting it done this way. And then anytime I have one of those, I try and give it a little bit of love. Okay. Next one, I know that 2250 works. Enter, then push the Dynamesh button. You can see our total points for the whole thing is going up quite a bit, right? This is still probably pretty high, but it doesn't matter. Again, we're doing this for specific reasons, and that's why it's fine that it's a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to do this. I know it kind of looks like all the bricks are looking the same, and you definitely can put some character into them, but right now we're just trying to get some basic forms in here. So we're just doing simple sculpt across the surface here, like that. Like this. Get rid of this edge here. I'm going to do these. Maybe do there. I'm going to eat into this one a little bit more. Like that. So I get something different. And again, I get that same urge, add more, add more, add more. We don't want to do that. Okay, down. And we're on to the other set of bricks. And if we want to look what they look like, turn off solo. And this is where we are. So this is the bricks I just made. Simple forms. Okay, this is the basic stuff. We'll get to adding more detail to it in a few minutes in the next video. But for now, we'll go back to solo. And this way, if you do them one at a time and you just do solo, you can really get that cathartic feel. Now, right now, nothing's happening, right? Well, that's because I haven't divided it. So this one, I'm going to say is a little bit smaller than the other one. So we'll just do 1850, enter, and then Dynamesh. And this one's 392, so really close to the other two. Okay, so I'll just do this. And if you feel better, you can do them all at once and go through them. To me, it's just, next. Again, we're trying to whip these out just more for class purposes. If I was doing this for a client or whatever, I'd really think this through a little bit more. But again, we're doing some speed stuff here, and I don't want... this is all so you understand what we're doing, and I don't want to get lost in the minutiae of sculpting it out. Probably what I'll end up doing is coming back in and redoing it, but doing it with in speed showing. So I'll go through and do another version of it with a nicer amount of detail and stuff. I'm just doing the back so it curves off funny. Sometimes you get that. You don't have to worry about how it looks in the back as much as I just want this face to feel like it's, you know, cut into a little bit more. So I'll take this one and we'll go to here, and then you just want to kind of cap it like that. You want to keep some of those hard edges, but again, we're just trying to get a feel for what our bricks. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one. The easy way is I pull back for me and I cut it really easy, and then I can do this. That. Okay. Okay. Next, just going down arrow, and this was pretty good, so we'll just do 1850, enter, Dynamesh, 453. I'm used to thinking bigger here. It's probably better if you're out further too, because it stops you from focusing on the small details. We're just trying to get this to be simple, stylized rock forms that these bricks came from the same place, so they're supposed to kind of look the same, so don't stress if they're all exactly the same. The job is not to make them each different. That's a common mistake for beginning sculptors. The job is to make them seem similar but still different, have their own life. And there's a whole series of art stuff that we could talk about, making your art make sure it has a life in it and everything of its own. But for now, we're just trying to get this out here and not bore you to death. And you know, you can do a couple of these. There we go. I want to get rid of that edge there. Okay. Down. Alt over. Oh, I do it every time I have it, right? So 1850 is. And Dynamesh. Oops. So the problem is if you don't push the 1850 enter, then you push Dynamesh. It just uses the default before you press enter. So do this. Do this. Let's see where we are. Okay. This is an edge brick. There's a few ways we'll talk about making this tile since we're sculpting and it's not just a simple texture change. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you look at those images that are attached, you'll see that a lot of time was spent on each of the stones, just slightly making them different. You don't want them all to be the same, but you don't want them to feel like they're duplicates and they're just the exact same thing. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll make this brush a lot bigger and I'll just do this all the way down like it's a cracked one. And we can add some crack feature later. If you hold the shift, it'll snap your zoom or your rotation to a certain degree, area. Okay, so this, this, this. And I think we have this one set up. Let's see where we are. Okay, and then we have these two. Again, 1850 Dynamesh solo, and make sure we're facing the front. You can tell by the head. And I need to choose one of these before I do it. I'm going to duplicate it and set it into the right position. And we'll talk about that in a second too. There's a lot of dancing involved with getting it to be tiled. We're just going to do the simplified version of it, and to do it for a game, you probably want to spend a little bit more time, but since this is your first ZBrush foray, I'm just trying to get you to understand the tools and have a little fun. Actually, this is pretty cathartic if you're an artist, once you get used to fighting with the tool that is ZBrush. Okay. Looking good. Not good enough. Okay. And then down one more. And now this is the one, so I'm going to take solo off real quick. This is the one that I'm going to duplicate it, and there's two ways to duplicate things. You can either come up to this object and click on the duplicate button, but you'll see right there it's Control-Shift-D. You'll get used to it, but you've got to start thinking about duplicating objects that way. Okay, so meaning pushing Control-Shift-D. So Control-Shift-D, and I've got now another one, and if we look, this one, or I guess it's, oops, it's probably below. This one and this one are the same. So if I hide one, one's still there. So what I'm going to do with this one is go to my move tool and just move it over. Just like that. So what I'll end up doing is duplicating this again and putting it on this side, but I want to sculpt it as one brick. If I sculpt it as two separate bricks, it's going to be hard to match them up. So we'll come back to this one, and we'll hide this, and we'll just do the solo, and back in here. Oh, and we still got to do the same thing. Okay. 1850 Dynamesh. Didn't mean to Dynamesh again. 1 second. Okay, so we're going to come in here and do this final couple of bricks here. Just kind of like this, get it in here, and spend some time. Now, again, you really want to take some time and make this its own brick, its own story and stuff. It doesn't have to be, you know, it's a brick, so it doesn't have to be this brick has been through some stuff, but you need to think of it that way. And then sometimes when you start to get the carving and the extra stuff inside of it, you'll get that same problem. You'll be able to make them all feel different, but you know, they're all from the same quarry or the same type of stone or whatever it is. So at this point though, let's see, let me rotate it here. Okay, and then let's turn this solo off. Yeah, that's fine. I probably could come back in and do some more work on it, and I will. I'll have to do it on the side and then just record it and do it quietly. And then let's come to this last one. And we're only going to do this one right now. We're not going to duplicate it and make it tile yet. We'll get to that. Okay, so again, 1850 50 Dynamesh. Okay. And then we're going to hide everything else. We're going to make this brick just like the other ones. Just because it's a corner brick, we don't want people to know that it's a tile. We're trying to make it so the tile works correctly. So, look at this here. Like this. Let me get it in here. Don't worry about the perfection or any of the crack stuff again. We're going to get into that in the next video about getting the cracks on. Just trying to get the forms, the basic idea of the bricks in there. Put that one there. This here, like that. Alright, so let's pull back out. I mean, there's so much work I want to do in this. It just itches my brain. But for now, it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video, and then in the next one, we'll get into doing using the other brushes that we can download, and I'll show you how to do that.